If there was one thing George S. Patton feared, it was the war ending before he had the chance to fight more of it. His insatiable desire to lead men into battle drove him to actions that would cement his reputation as a fearless and driven commander. Despite Colonel Rockenbach's disapproval of Patton's tendency to leave his command post and advance with the troops, a congratulatory letter from General Pershing praising Patton's performance in earlier operations silenced any criticism. Recognizing his potential, Rockenbach sent Patton and his command to support one corps in the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, positioning them just west of Verdun. Patton wasted no time. Borrowing a French uniform, he personally reconnoitered the battlefield, as he had done before Saint-Mihiel. The mission he devised was bold. 140 tanks would spearhead a focused assault through 12 miles of heavily fortified German lines. Once the defenses were breached, the tanks were to lead a relentless pursuit of the retreating enemy. Patton's meticulous planning laid the groundwork for the operation, but as always in war, nothing unfolded as expected. The assault began with a thunderous artillery barrage at 2:30 a.m. on September 26th. Early morning mist obscured the battlefield, masking the tanks from German view, but rendering Patton's observation post useless. Unable to assess the situation from afar, Patton, true to his nature, left his post accompanied by 2 officers and a dozen runners. He followed the sound of gunfire to the front, where he found the tanks had advanced 5 miles, but faced significant resistance in the hamlet of Cheppy. There, Patton encountered a group of panicked soldiers retreating under heavy fire. Taking immediate command, he rallied the men and led them forward behind the advancing tanks. As the fighting intensified, Patton noticed several tanks bogged down in trenches, with their crews reluctant to dig them out under relentless fire. Demonstrating his belief in leading by example, Patton grabbed a shovel, unstrapped it from one of the tanks, and began digging while under enemy fire. His actions inspired the men to follow suit, and soon 5 tanks were back in action. Raising his walking stick, he called to the infantry behind him, "Let's go get them! Who is with me?" He led the charge toward the German positions. As they crested a rise, machine gun fire raked their position. The men hit the ground, but Patton, trembling with fear, stood firm. Reflecting on his family's legacy, he reportedly muttered to himself, "It is time for another Patton to die." Then, louder, he called to his troops, "Let's go!" With just a handful of soldiers, Patton pushed forward, though one by one the men around him fell. His orderly, Joe Angelo, cried out, "We are alone." Patton replied, "Come on anyway." Moments later, a round tore through Patton's left thigh, exiting near his rectum. He collapsed into a shell hole, bleeding heavily. Angelo B. bandaged the wound tightly before carrying out Patton's orders to direct tank fire against the enemy. Patton, still commanding from the ground, sent a sergeant to relay orders to Captain Sereno Brett, instructing him to take command of the brigade. Refusing to be evacuated until the battle subsided, Patton remained in the shell hole for over an hour, directing his men and ensuring the tanks continued their advance. Once enemy fire slackened, stretcher bearers finally retrieved Patton. Even as he was carried to an ambulance, he ordered it to stop at division headquarters so he could deliver his report before being taken to the hospital. The battle marked a turning point for the Meuse-Argonne Offensive, as the tanks led a significant advance and the Germans began a full retreat. Patton's leadership and determination under fire quickly made headlines, with newspapers highlighting his daring exploits. Despite his severe wound, Patton's recovery was swift. By October 17th, he was promoted to colonel, with Rockenbach enthusiastically endorsing the decision. Though still recovering, Patton returned to his command, issuing strict orders to enforce discipline and military bearing among his men, while drafting recommendations for decorations to honor their bravery in battle. For Patton, the end of the war was bittersweet. On November 11, 1918, his 33rd birthday, the armistice silenced the guns. While the world celebrated peace, Patton, ever the warrior, lamented its arrival, writing to his wife, "I rather hope not, for I would like to have a few more fights." Though this war had ended, it was clear that Patton's fight was far from over. For more secret stories of cunning, endurance, and iron resolve, subscribe to The Shadows and the Past.